Hi, team. All right. So let's talk about what we're doing today. So, first of all, I want to remind you you've got some practice questions on a worksheet today. I'm also going to add a little bit to what we did yesterday. Okay. So, I'm going to post that and make sure that you guys know. But today, here's what we're doing. So, we're going to take a quick set of notes on psychology and the different professions that you can do. And then we're going to go back to our article from yesterday and we're going to choose one more perspective that we didn't cover. So, if you want to do that part on your own, you can. If you want to do that with a buddy, you can, right? If they did something different from you and you want them to help you, that's great. Okay. So, you should have 3 perspectives total when you're done today. All right, so again, I've not gotten around to changing the dates. I'm so sorry. I swear it's going to be ready for you. But we're still in our scientific foundations unit, and today we're talking about professional psychology and the things that you can do. So, one thing I want to clarify before we dive into this is that a psychiatrist, a psychologist, and a counselor are different things. Those are different degrees. They go to school for different amounts of time. And so we're going to dive into some of those issues today, and I'm going to try to be very, very clear about them. But if you have any questions, make sure you let me know. All right. So the first thing that you can do if you have an actual degree in psychology is you can do clinical psychology. So what this means is that you are diagnosing people and treating them, but you're not using medication and you're not using like medical approaches. So you're not doing like CAT scans and MRIs and any of those like medical tests. All right. What you are doing is you're going to do patient interviews. So that's kind of what we think of as like regular therapy, like when you're talking with someone. You might do a little bit of testing, but for most of that, you're going to need to refer them to a medical doctor. And you might also run some group therapy. You also find clinical psychologists working at places like rehab centers, working at youth centers, sometimes even at schools, things like that, right? Because they don't need all the medical facilities. Another thing that you can do that uses psychology is counseling. So I want to be very clear, this is sometimes a different degree path than a psychologist. So all psychologists can be counselors, but not all counselors are psychologists. Does that make sense to you guys? So you can counsel if you have like a social work degree, if you have like a developmental degree, like there are a lot of different degrees that you can have to counsel. You are probably going to specialize in one area if you do that. So that might be marriage counseling, family counseling, stress counseling, whatever that looks like. So, for example, my therapist is a counselor, she's a social worker, and she specializes in like stress and anxiety. They're going to use the same techniques as a clinical psychologist. So, they're going to do talk therapy, they're going to do group therapy, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so you can also be an industrial organization psychologist. So you're going to have a psychology degree, and people with this job usually run human resources departments. They usually work to like just make it a good place to be. So maybe that means they're like helping to streamline production, making sure people are satisfied with their jobs, making sure they get breaks, they're adequately compensated, all that kind of stuff. And they might work on structures and procedures within the organization. So organizing, a retreat every year, making sure we have team building activities, making sure we do harassment training or sensitivity training or whatever that looks like. An industrial psychologist is going to take care of that stuff. So if you don't really want to interact with people, you might, or see patients, then you might be an experimental psychologist. So these are the people who do the experiments. So for instance, William Wundt, who we learned about a couple days ago, who set up the first lab, he would be considered an experimental psychologist. So they can do stuff in all kinds of different areas, but usually they focus on one. So learning, behavior. They use some of those major approaches that we talked about yesterday. And some of those might be development, it might be education, it might be cognitive. Again, it might be biological behavior, like we talked about. So, this is where those specialties really come into play. Not that they're not used in other places, but this is where you're most likely to see the division. Okay, so you guys have some time to work now, so I just want to remind you of what I'm expecting you to do. First thing is you're going to go back and you're going to do one more perspective from your article yesterday. Then you're going to complete our practice questions. Excuse me. Woo. And then you might want to review for our quiz tomorrow. It's going to be short, just a few questions. If you've been taking your notes and doing your reading guide, you're going to have no problem. Okay. And I'm going to continue to drop the lowest quiz score grade, just like we did for your reading quizzes in 9th and 10th grade. Okay, so that's the standard here. If you have any questions, hit me up on email or join us in office hours.